So that's my pearl. To move minds, you have to first move hearts. My pearl, and really what I'm talking about tonight, or tonight for me, today for you, is the power of empathy and the power of connection with people and how they play in together. You know, because when we look at what we do as leaders or as educators, we're in a people industry. You know, we're working with kids, we're working with each other, working with faculty, and we're working with parents, and it's very much a people industry. And people are inherently emotional beings. So as leaders, we're constantly navigating those emotions and those wide, varied emotions that happen in any given situation. And really, we sort of sit back and think, going, how do we do that effectively? How do we navigate those emotions effectively? And you know, when I first came into leadership, and really that was in Hong Kong, my then principal, who was and is a mentor of mine, said relationships are everything. And as leaders, building solid relationships is the foundation of leadership. And so I went, of course, that makes absolute sense. You know, and cerebrally, I embrace that. But then as I moved through, leadership roles, in terms of moving out of coordinators roles into vice principal, assistant principal roles, and that influence, that leadership sphere got bigger. And now moving into a principal's role, I sort of really started to think about, what does that mean? You know, what does that look like? And how do I do that for everyone, not just the people I naturally gravitate towards? You know, so when you come into this leadership, it's got to be for everybody. You know, so it's going, how do you do that effectively? Because as leaders, we're constantly asking people to do things. We're constantly asking people to change things. We're asking people to make things better for student learning. We're asking for constant growth. And that idea of change is something I think that is inherently difficult for us as human beings. You know, we like things to be comfortable. We like things to be that status quo. And we're constantly asking people to push themselves outside of their boundaries. And really, the big thing I was looking at was going, how do we do that? And for me to do that, to facilitate that change, I needed to engage people. And to engage people personally, I needed to connect with them directly. I found it very important to connect one-on-one and connect directly with those people. You sort of sit back and you just go, oh, how do we connect with people? You know, how do we make those connections? How do we get that done? And the big thing for me was to intentionally seek people out, was to intentionally spend time to get to know them, to intentionally spend time to get to know my team, the people I'm working with, to understand their story, to understand their perspective, and to know where they're coming from. You know, because everybody's coming from a different perspective. Bambi was just saying, you know, you put the one word up and everybody has their own perspective of that. It's the same thing with any situation. When you've got a situation, people come at it from different angles. And it's really important, I think, as leaders, to listen to people, to understand where people are coming from, so that you know that where they're coming from, because they're all coming from a different place. And that allows you, or allows me as a leader, to step into their shoes, to understand what motivates them and what drives them. And in essence, that's what empathy is, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And that takes time, and that takes an intentional effort, I think, to spread that across a lot of people. So, and it's also a two-way street. It's a mutual benefit, because if you take the time to go and speak with people, to understand people, to connect with those people, that gives you the opportunity for them to connect with you, and for them to understand where you're coming from, to understand what your beliefs are. So it's a two-way street. So setting up that opportunity for that two-way street, and that's building their empathy for me as a leader, and also building my empathy for them as part of the team. And I think that mutual benefit is such an important, and is such an important piece to drive teams forward. And it was interesting when reading all the different styles, especially yesterday and today, the affiliative style really resonated for me, like where people come first, and creating strong bonds and making connections and creating that one feels safe. So I think in terms of that, the big thing within building those connections is building that empathy and understanding where people are coming from. I think that's such an important piece of what we do as leaders and is foundational. Second area that is that I find I really have become intentional about as well is to assume positive intent. This is something that resonated with me out of the adaptive schools workshops, from the 7 norms of collaboration. And, within that, assuming positive intent is such a powerful norm, because, when people come to work and people come to school to do a job well. They have good intentions, they mean well, and they come in just to do well despite the outcomes. And I think as leaders coming in with that positive intent and breaks down those barriers and sets up that climate of trust, just like what Karina was talking about last night. So if you come in with that positive intent and you're assuming that people are coming from a good place and assuming that people are coming from a positive place, you build that trust. Connections with positive intent builds that sense of trust. And if you give that, you get it back, and you get it back in tenfold. So, it's really tonight, the nub of what my Pearl is all about is making connections and building that positive intent. And to wrap that up, I think my wife is a very, very smart woman, is an elementary teacher and an English teacher and middle school English teacher at times, has a saying that she bases her teaching philosophy around. It applies here, and I think it applies to what we do as teachers. And I think the saying is, to move minds, you have to first move hearts. I'll say that again, to move minds, you have to first move hearts. And in order to do that, you've got to build a culture of connection first, and build that culture of empathy so we can understand each other, so we know where each other's coming from, so that we can then bond together as a team and move everything forward. Because from there, everything builds out of that. That's the foundation of everything that we do as leaders. So that's my Pearl. To move minds, you have to first move hearts. So if you take anything away from that, that's the saying. Anyway, thanks very much. And I'll pass back to Steve.